Nah, I'm just a worm. Dark Bleatings, everybody, coming to you today with a list because people seem to enjoy lists, and I'm going to be naming 10 awesome contemporary female horror authors. So by contemporary I mean people like Mary Shelley and Radcliffe and Susan Hill won't be on this list, not because they're not great female authors, it's just that every time I try searching for great female horror authors, the lists are always made up, at least half I'd say, with authors who are sadly no longer with us, and I feel like it gives like a weird impression that there aren't, you know, hundreds, thousands of female horror authors currently writing today, still producing books and still releasing things, and people with that are either newish or they've got a good back catalogue that you can check out if you stumble upon something good. The last time I made a female specific video, people came at me and I had to actually block 2 people, so I'm actually a bit nervous, which is so stupid, but also at the same time, if you're going to come at me for specifically listing women, fuck off. So the reason that I'm going female specific for this list is because most of what I review has been written by straight white men, and I love you straight white men, but I did realise that there was a very disproportionate amount of books by that demographic as opposed to every other demographic that I review, and I'm making a more concerted effort to be more sort of deliberate about how I balance things out. And also I am a female author, and I kind of know the plight of people won't even pick up your book because a female wrote it. And if you think that I'm making that up, I will be popping some links for some sources and references in the description for you. There have been studies done about the readership for female authors, and apparently as of last year only about 20% of the readership for female authors is men, meaning that 80% of male readers won't pick up a book written by a woman at all, which is quite bizarre. And I've got a bad feeling that that might even be a bit worse in horror, because for some reason people associate it with men and male writers, and maybe that's because of the abundance of Stephen King books and Dean Koontz books, and you know, like all of these great writers that rightfully deserve their spot. But yeah, I want to bring a bit more attention to the gals, because there are lots of them and they're writing some really cool stuff. So here are 10 of my favourites at the moment. There will be several videos in this series because I didn't want to try and just shove all of the female writers that I love into one video and sit here for hours and hours. So first up, I'm going to gloss over this one just a little bit because I spoke about her last week, but I would be remiss to not mention S.Q. McGrath again. And here's my collection so far. Well, these are the ones I've read. I have others on my shelf that I haven't read. So S.Q. McGrath has been writing for a number of years now, but doesn't, to me, seem like she's got an enormous readership at the moment, but she really deserves to have an enormous readership. I kind of like that she keeps releasing these books and stuff despite that, because it shows that she actually cares about storytelling and enjoys the process, and keeps giving us great books. And I'm really looking forward to watching her career grow, because I'm like 100% sure it's going to. So I've talked about The Women in the Woods at length, so this is a folk horror. Hilltop House has got some dark humour in it. It's about a house that takes a liking to its one of its new inhabitants. A woman and her daughter move in, and the house takes a liking to the daughter, and we spend a lot of the book in the viewpoint of the house, who is slightly unhinged, and the way that that is depicted is really interesting and quite insidious. And yeah, I really enjoyed it. And then she also, these two deal with different timelines, and S.Q. McGrath is really great at writing in past and present tense and then like merging things together in a really satisfying way. So if you're looking for someone with sort of like multifaceted talents in storytelling, but are particularly strong penchant for interweaving timelines and different viewpoints. Esky McGrath is your gal. Next, my girl, Gemma Amor. And I say my girl, even though I have met her one time in real life and I've conversed with her a little bit on the internet since then. But I've just been so interested in her work. I think I said my gal because, like, you know, we're both British, and that's always fun when you get to meet your favourite authors at conventions. But I got really interested in Gemma Amor and I picked this up after several people recommended it to me. So this is Dear Laura. I bought this from Gemma at a convention, and then a year later I bought this bad boy from Gemma at a convention, and then the others I've ordered as they've been released. So Gemma writes across lots of different subgenres as well, but one thing that she is absolutely excellent at is tackling mental health and trauma. So I have a pet peeve in horror, especially about depictions of mental health. I normally, the second I realise that that's what I'm reading, I start switching off, because unfortunately for books that I've picked up in my personal experience, about 9 times out of 10 it's not like handled very sensitively or realistically or respectfully. I get very sick of oh, the mental illness was the villain all along kind of stories. They're just not for me. I especially get pissed off with characters who've experienced trauma, just constantly and permanently behaving like frazzled victims all the time, and their opinions can't be trusted, and maybe they're having these hallucinations and flashbacks. And I'm not saying that these aren't things that all can't happen, but typically it's not that dramatic. A lot of people have experienced trauma. A lot of people have got mental health struggles. It doesn't always surface as like, oh, this person has some mental health issue, which means they're now a serial killer, and you know, do you know what I mean? Like, just stuff like that. So anyway, Dear Laura is about a woman who, when she was a girl, her friend was kidnapped. The last thing she saw was this guy get into a van, and then every year on her birthday, the person who claims they took her friend writes her a letter and gives her some information, but he always wants something back. So this, oh, I don't know, this is like a one sitting read for me. It was really gripping. It tackles sort of like the PTSD, but like the repetitive nature of like a trauma cycle when you can't break out of it because it keeps coming back to your present in a very literal sense. So that was really good. And then Full Immersion was my book of the year last year. This is about a woman who signs up for an experimental type of mental health therapy in the form of like a VR kind of setup, but there's a lot more to it than that, and it goes really, really deep, and it sort of really empathetically and sincerely explores postnatal depression and things like that. So this is, I feel like a lot of people would get something out of reading this, like certainly a sense of community and kinship with other women. The Folly is a newish one that came out this year. This is a sort of coastal ghostly story, so completely different. Does deal with some past stuff that comes up. We have our main character, a lady. They go to stay in this folly, and by they I mean her and her dad, who has been released from prison for a very questionable crime, and it's about the relationship, how it's changed, and questions, and then ghosty stuff. It's very creepy. And then I have not yet read Gemma's newest short story collection, All Who Wander Are Lost, and it's Destination Horror Stories, so I'm really looking forward to getting to that. But basically, yeah, she usually tackles, from what I've read so far, mental health or trauma, but she always puts it in a completely different framework. So it's like, even though she thematically kind of works in a similar area each time, it's a totally different story with like in a totally different subgenre. So like, yeah, her work is super interesting to me. Next up, Holley Cornetto, who I mentioned in the last video, who is the author of They Are Cursed Like You, that she co-wrote with S.O. Green, and she also wrote a novella last year, or maybe the year before, called We Haunt These Woods. We Haunt These Woods really impressed me, because I remember her submitting that for Novella November, and it was it really very much reminded me of Stephen King's It, not with an evil clown, but it was like a dual timeline, sort of like a coming of age, but like kind of two coming of age stories really, because we've got like the characters from the past coming back to the present, and they're sort of re-embarking on something. There's a very creepy villain, the Forest Man, I think they're called. So that was great. And then They Are Cursed Like You is my favourite witch book that I think I've ever read. Well, definitely in the top few witch books I've ever read anyway. I really enjoyed that. So completely different genres. Absolutely nailed both of those though. Next, straight up savage, but she's so sweet and friendly in real life, so it's mad. But Penny Jones, this is my favourite work from Penny Jones, Suffer Little Children, which is part of the Black Shadows micro collection series. So Penny Jones I know for short fiction, so short stories. So I've obviously got this book, and then I've read short stories that she's written in anthologies and things like that, and I've been reading Penny for years. I didn't even realise that until I read this, and I was like, wait a minute, I remember being straight up savaged by Penny Jones before. She writes stories that either lull you into a false sense of security and then smash you in the face, or from the very beginning you're like, oh no, but you can't tear your eyes away from what you're reading. Unexpected horrors. She deals very well in real world horror. Suffer Little Children, the title, you can guess this is quite a savage book that I might not recommend to parents who are sensitive about certain things, like harm coming to children. But it's she's just not afraid to go there with the dark topics. I think that she's also written novellas. I know that Penny does a lot. Like she's she's not just an author. I think she works like quite a lot like within the indie horror community. So like I'll link everyone's websites anyway, so you can go check her out. But yeah, I would for sure recommend this one if you would like to be shocked and cry a little as well. Alexis Henderson is my next recommendation. I got Year of the Witching last year when I was on a mission trying to find witch horror, and this is a sort of period horror drama with a feminist slant to it. As you can guess, it's about the possibility of witchcraft, I think it's a puritanical town accusing people of witchcraft, and then we have our main character and you're sort of like back and forth trying to decide what's going on. And then I immediately bought House of Hunger when it came out. So here she's dabbling with the idea of vampirism, but in a really interesting way. So our main character is super poor. She's like, you know, not quite of the streets, but not far off, and she works a lot as a maid, I think, and she pays for everything for her and her horrible brother. And then she gets chosen to be a blood maid, and blood maids are a type of servant that services the nobility, so like noble families, like reputable rich families, but within those circles it's like a real honor to be a blood maid, and it's exactly what it sounds like. You're sort of bloodletting for like rich people, because they think that like your lord or lady will believe that your blood has like youth properties or something to it. And the house that she goes to, there are several blood maids, and so there's a bit of competition for like being the top blood maid or whatever, and there's just like a lot of benefits to it. So it's like it's a rags to riches story on a really creepy backdrop, set in the past a little bit, maybe like Victorian England if I remember correctly. I could be a bit off on the time, and then there's then we start to wonder about the lady of the house a bit, and what's happened to, you know, past blood maids and things. So I was like super hooked, and I'm really looking forward to her next release, which I can't remember the name of off the top of my head. I think it's An Academy for Liars, that could be another author though that I've ordered, so I don't know. But yeah, she writes great sort of like period horror. Next up, I'll touch on this one quickly as well because I mentioned her book in last week's video, but Erica Summers, one of my new favourite authors, full stop, like whatever demographic you're in, she's in my top 10 at the moment. So I have read Bad God's Tower, which was sort of a, it was like a Western horror adventure novella. That's not really like up my street. I'm not a huge fan of like a Western feel type stuff, but I really enjoyed it. It was like quite a fun ride about these two guys that bust out of jail, and you know, maybe they get their comeuppance. She's also co-written with H.M. Wool a novella called Writhe, which is like a parasitic body horror almost about a guy and these worms, and that one is so much like, that's just a tearing good time, completely different to Bad God's Tower in every way. It's like a writing style aside, it's like it was written by a different person. It's like so far removed. And then Vanity Kills, which there's a film version of, I've recently learned, called Obsidian. Vanity Kills is about a group of people that are undergoing a medical trial for an experimental drug that's supposed to be able to remove like scar tissue. So all the group is made up of people who've got different types of scarring. So we get a lot of like cool backstory. All these people have got interesting stories about how they got this scar. Some of them are absolutely savage though, and you don't see it coming in a book like this. Like there's a flashback scene for this one guy, and let's just say what happens to his knees makes that hobbling scene in Misery look like Disney produced it. I think I've already described it that way in a previous video, but I will never stop describing it that way. It was hideous. Yeah, there's a whole bunch of stuff going on. So that's like that's kind of like a fun horror romp, you might say. It's like, it's not too heavy, but it does have heavy themes, but there's a lot of gore and stuff as well, so it's great. And then Mantis, which is my favourite one. I talked about that last week, I won't go into it, but that's sort of like almost like a biblical apocalyptic kind of horror story. Mantis is my favourite protagonist ever, I think. That is about getting the gang back together to fight demons and track down artefacts and find someone's kid that's gone missing, been kidnapped. All on this huge biblical supernatural backdrop. So yeah, super fun. So Erica Summers she just like hops between all these subgenres so seamlessly. Her storytelling is great. Her endings are always really, really satisfying. That like, I never really know where anything is quite going, but everything is tied up beautifully. Like, she's great at like setup and payoff and that kind of thing. Her narrative style and her writing style is like really for me, and I really, really am enjoying her books at the moment. Next, from across the pond, I don't know where most of these writers are from, by the way, apart from the ones I've met in real life. But Mary SanGiovanni is American, and I won this book in a Goodreads giveaway years and years ago, Thrall, when I first joined Goodreads. So this is an early book of hers, or earlier anyway, and Mary just writes in all sorts of subgenres as well, and she's spectacular. She has most recently, I know she's written a book in the Alien franchise, which I'm always impressed by, people who get to write novelizations in franchises that I love like that, and I have it, but I haven't read it yet, but I'm really excited to get to it. But Mary deals in all sorts of shit, like not shit like bad, like all sorts of shit. So yeah, it's just supernatural, monsters, real world, aliens, and she's I don't know, she has such a way with words. Like, her books are real page turners. She's great at character again. I usually find myself quite attached, so I don't know where you should start with Mary SanGiovanni. I don't think you can go wrong. I mean, pick anything up and then you can just work your way through her back catalogue, because she does have a lot of stuff available, which is great, because if you're anything like me, when you find a new author that you like, it's always great when you Google them and they've got like a whole history of stuff that you can order. It's always so sad when you find someone and they only have 2 books out and then you have to wait, because I'm impatient. Totally different type of author now. We have Lee Murray. Let me show you this properly. This is Fox Spirit on a different different. This is Fox Spirit on a Distant Cloud by Lee Murray. Lee Murray is an Asian New Zealander who writes a lot of, I would say that her style, from what I read so far, is she infuses real world incidents into her fiction. So she fictionalizes like particular things that have happened or are happening, and it really makes her horror really horrific. And the thing about Lee is she's so nice that, like, if you've ever spoken to her or seen her in an interview or anything like that, she's such a lovely, like, breath of fresh air type of person to speak to. And then you pick up her book and you're like, oh, what is happening? Like, she will rip your heart out, stomp on it, and then cut your head off and set you on fire. This is my favourite, and it's her most recent work. I've also read a couple of her novellas, Dispatches, that dealt with a war. This is stories told from a female Asian perspective, and the stories are all threaded together through this central narrator of the fox spirit. And I just loved this book so much because I'd never heard of a fox spirit, so that was like, we get some like nice mythology, more Eastern mythology there. The stories, like I said, combine like fictional scenarios, and some of them are blended with incidents that have happened, and they're absolutely horrific. But these are stories of women who come to unfortunate ends, their stories and what led them to where they're going. It's really, really hard hitting, so that, like, don't pick up Lee Murray's work thinking you're going to get a fun horror romp, because you're not. You're going to get something heavy, thought-provoking, and dare I say this and sound like a pretentious twat, but like important. I feel like she writes important literature, things that we could all do with reading, things that are a good exercise in empathy for certain female experiences, especially the Asian female experience. So yeah, I really highly recommend her. I believe she's won awards. I know she's at least been nominated if she's not won, but she's a great contemporary. She really brings like horror up to date and into the real world, if that makes sense. Next up, an author that typically writes in a genre that I actively avoid. It is Judith Sonnet from Extreme Horror. So yeah, I don't normally read extreme horror because it's too much for me. I can read stories about sort of, you know, human suffering, because that happens in basically all horror, it's to some extent, but I really can't deal with sort of relentless, cruel human suffering, humans inflicting terrible suffering on other humans. So like, I can deal with someone getting like chomped to death by zombies, but I can't deal with someone tied up in a chair being tortured for hours and things like that. It's just not my jam. However, this was recommended. I picked it up as part of an extreme horror reading vlog, which is where I started my extreme horror journey and ended it. And it's just different. It's just different to the others. So like, yes, the content is really severe and it's really upsetting, and it's I mean, it's no joke. Like, do not pick this up expecting like a light read. It's horrible. It's really, really horrible. However, Judith is a really good writer, and around all of this horrible, visceral nastiness was a very compelling premise with characters that I actually gave a crap about, and I can't stop thinking about it. I read it last year and it's still firmly lodged in my brain. I have been told off because I recommended it to some people that, like me, don't read extreme horror, so I've been bollocked a little bit, but I don't know, like, I would read more of Judith's work. Like, so I think that Judith is so good that despite the fact that I actively avoid extreme horror, I will buy more Judith Sonnet books, regardless of whether they're extreme or not. She's a really good storyteller. I know that she's very popular in the indie horror community, and I know that this book in particular got to a lot of people as well. It got under the skin. So yeah, I think that she's I don't know, she's really talented. Like, I think the balance between the the really extreme scenes and then the framework, the character work and her actual writing somehow still works for me. But yeah, I would love to hear from you if you've read this and if you were equally as sickened. But yeah, I can't not put Judith on a list like this. She's great. And lastly, I wanted to end on a lighter one. Angela Sylvaine, who I mentioned last week. Now I'm recommending Angela Sylvaine on the basis of one book, and that's Frostbite, which I've already talked about, so I'm not going to go on about it too much. But Angela is also a great storyteller. She mixes comedy with horror really, really well. Her ideas are very unique. I've never read anything quite like Frostbite, and once again, Psycho Prairie Dogs. So yes, Angela is a writer that can offer you some light frothiness, but also heavy themes and sad scenes. So yeah, wholeheartedly recommend Angela. Maybe if you are looking for a good feel horror romp, like, which is, I know I keep saying that, it sounds like a weird phrase, but I just feel like horror fans will know exactly what I mean. And let me know who your favourite female authors are as well, so that I can check some out in case I've undoubtedly missed a bunch. Please